Hello. Today I would like to talk about blockchain and use cases which I do believe, and about various problems which we have to solve, and maybe even which use cases we will never cover with blockchain, and I will explain why. So first, let's talk about money. And these days we know that blockchain transactions could be really expensive and quite slow. For Bitcoin, for example, in December, some people paid even up to $20 worth of Bitcoins for moving any amount of Bitcoin. It's really expensive transactions. Also, in the same Bitcoin, to have the transaction, usually we know that it's like 10 minutes per block. But when there are so many people who would like to do transfers on blockchain, we can wait for hours and even days. So the question is why? Why we are not able to have fast transactions as in Visa network? Or for example, Revolut. People are liking this service because it's almost instant transfer. And there are a couple of really interesting problems in scaling blockchain. First, problem is speed, yes? So speed is how fast you can see transactions. Another problem in scaling blockchain is transactions per second. So how many transactions we actually can have done per second. Another problem, if we will go forward with smart contracts, with storing data on blockchain, it's size of blockchain. And also I will touch much more problems a little bit later. So how blockchain works? First, just imagine that there are a couple of different computers around the planet which are all the time syncing information between themselves. And each of those computers connecting to a couple of nodes on different computers. And then they read information from that chain and they are verifying if that information is correct or not. So if there is a person who is doing transaction and sending it using one Bitcoin node or just blockchain node, that information will be spread through all the network a little bit later. And here you have a couple of things to do. First, it's that it have to be spread over the network. So it's a speed, how fast all the network will know that you did some transaction. Another problem is that those nodes have to verify if your private keys are correct, or if you didn't try to spend the same Bitcoin in another paying to another person, just using different node and send the same transaction from different node as a double spending problem. So all the transactions in Bitcoin are packing to the blocks. And you have a lot of transactions in one block, and we are formatting those blocks. So why blocks are each 10 minutes, not each second? Because network needs time to be sure that all the transactions which were sent already synchronized between those nodes. Sure, you can in Ethereum network you have transactions each 14 seconds or so, like blocks each 14 seconds or so. You can try make them even a little blocks even faster, like each second, but then you really have problems that you will have chain of blocks, and in some way some nodes will be mining different transactions than another, and then when they will sync in one place, you will have to delete this branch and recalculate those transactions again. And those micro forks would be happening all the time. Actually, right now on Ethereum, micro forks are happening all the time, each day. They're just not significant, and network is synchronizing and going forward by deleting those not needed branches. So speed in synchronizing nodes, it's really a problem. And if somebody needs something which have to happen in parts of second, that never will be done on blockchain, just because of nature of distributed systems. Let's talk about another limitations of blockchains. It's a amount of transactions per second. In Bitcoin, we have only like 3 transactions per second, which is comparing to Visa network, centralized one, which can work with 20,000 transactions per second. Why? Why Bitcoin and even Ethereum has so few transactions per second? The problem is that we are putting those transactions in blocks. And those blocks have to be synchronized among all the nodes in the network. So when we are putting one block with a lot of transactions in that block will have, for example, 1 megabyte of in size. Even if we would go with the proposal of Bitcoin Cash and we will say that let's have 64 megabytes per block, that's still not a Visa scale. Okay, let's think, could we go for even bigger blocks, so we would put more information to that database? Why not? There are a couple of fundamental problems. First problem is that all the nodes in blockchain have to sync that information. And if you want to have fast transactions, like each second, each 5 seconds, each half second, so we have to send that data of 1 megabyte or 100 megabyte. That block have to be sent and synchronized over the whole blockchain. And networking has natural limitations. So we are not able to send terabytes per second. And I don't know how many years we will wait for such level of scalability. So, and if we will go for 100 megabytes block, even if some technologies allows us these days to do that, that would mean that all the normal people would be not able to participate in that network because they don't have good enough internet connection. And that would mean that we are becoming more centralized again. So networking, it's a big problem. Another big problem is actually with the same block size, it's a storage. So how many gigabytes of data we can store in our database. And just imagine that if each second we would create 10 megabytes block. That's a lot of information if you will think that per hour we have 3,600 seconds. So that would mean more than gigabyte per hour. And per year that would be already terabytes of information. And at the moment on Ethereum we have, if you're running full node, you would need to have more than 1 terabyte space to sync the blockchain. And that's already becoming hard for people, and they are using light nodes to not to sync everything in blockchain from the history of blockchain. There are a couple of different solutions how they are solving, and I will talk about that later. But really size matters. And even if we will cut the site, if we will store not everything, we will have to suffer with something. Either centralization, either speed, either provability of history, something. If you would like to run Facebook or Twitter on blockchain, that's impossible. Nobody these days tries to put to blockchain that much information as a, I don't know, maybe even millions messages per second to the Twitter stream. It's much more than just transactions in Visa network. Okay, now let's go more than for money. Let's imagine that we would like to create a platform for different kind of games and applications, smart contracts. And I was just watching interview with CryptoKitties founder, and when he was asked about what stopped or what kind of limitation he sees for CryptoKitties, he told, because blockchain is very limited, they had to cut the features, not to have all the features needed, and not that many people used CryptoKitties as it would be if that would be much cheaper in terms of transactions and especially transaction speed. And usually people think that, if you would like to scale like Ethereum, we need like 1,000 times scalability. And that's not true. We are talking about millions times scalability, not even 1 million. It would be not enough. Just imagine that only one CryptoKitty was killing the whole blockchain. And CryptoKitty could be at least 100 times more popular if we would add more features and would have cheaper participation in that game. And now with one CryptoKitty is 100 times needs already 100 times more speed. You're adding 1,000 different games, and you're adding thousands of different smart contracts and applications, and then you're adding much more transactions just of money transactions. It's a huge amount of data. And here it's not only speed but also CPU, computation. In Ethereum we have a thing called gas limit. And when you're paying, you're saying how many gas you maximum will pay, but each transaction has some gas which it will use. It's like, just imagine you're going to your car, sitting, and to go 500 kilometers you would need like, I don't know, like 10 liters or something of petrol. And now here you have to pay with your ethers and buy gas. But not everyone knows that we have gas limit in each block. So currently each block has only 8 millions of maximum gas. So miners are not able to give to accept more transactions than for 8 million gas. So even if that would be one transaction for one smart contract, which is really complicated one, that would not work, because complicated smart contract could eat more than 8 million of gas, and blockchain would never ever store that transaction in blockchain. And that's a big problem, because we are not able to create more complicated solutions on blockchain these days. The question is why? And the answer is because in Ethereum gas means not only space but also CPU, computational power. Because all of those nodes which we were talking already many times about would have to run those computations on them. And if those computations would have more expensive operations, some cryptographic computations and stuff, that would mean that we are not able to run per second so many different programs on the same nodes. You have to scale them somehow, and that's a big limit. So it's a it's a database, it's a CPU, and it's also like network. Okay, and now let's talk about how we would fix blockchain scalability problems. Back in the 90s, internet was so slow, and these days 100 megabit internet connection, it's just normal thing. And in blockchain there are various ideas how we will scale it. One idea is sharding idea, or sidechains idea, when not all the information would be stored in one database. But just imagine that you would have another smaller databases or even bigger databases, maybe a little bit more centralized, running on less nodes, and it would be possible to store or to pack somehow those databases to main database. And that's one of the potential solutions, just to having side chains. Another scaling solution is payment channels, and what Lightning Network is doing. So just imagine that people are sending transactions to each others, and on blockchain they are just sometimes persisting data. So on their off-chain, they could have just a lot of small transactions, and once in a while, maybe once per month or once per hour, they would send a transaction to blockchain. So on blockchain, you would have only result of all their transactions between themselves, and I do believe that that's okay, and that's a really amazing thing what is doing Lightning. And I really do believe that thanks to Lightning and payment channels, the problem of scaling money on internet, programmable money, it's already solved. And I don't want to talk a lot of about how to scale money and Bitcoin, because it's already solved problem. The much interesting and much more bigger problem is how to scale smart contracts and how to scale data. And obviously, if you would like to store all your photos on blockchain, that would never scale. And that's a fundamental problem of importance. In blockchain, everything is same important. Just to think about news. When we are reading news, there are more important news for us. For example, Trump is talking something with Putin. It's important information and news for society. And there is another information, for example, that John from small village in Buhapa went to toilet today. What's interesting is that on blockchain, any transaction about CryptoKitty or sending millions of dollars to some person, or identity verification on some smart contract, all those transactions are same important. So if you have important transaction or you have not important transaction, all of them will be synced among all of those nodes, stored. Even if that's side chains, and you would say there are not important side chains, super centralized side chains, then my question is, so if they are not important and super centralized, why we need them to be blockchain? Why they just can't be normal databases and just use blockchain for what's important? I don't want to know that John in Muhaupa went to toilet and to store that information forever, for all the humanity history. It's this time information which is like sending in Lightning, that I bought a coffee, I bought a something. It's not information which have to be stored in blockchain. Maybe that I opened payment channel and now I will participate in some payments. Maybe when I bought the house or car or opened the company, that's important information. So I do believe that we really should think of blockchain as a storage of important information, because all not important information should have right to be deleted, should have right to be deleted even forever or never known by everyone. I don't care what is happening now on Mars, what is temperature on Mars, and even if I'm talking about Mars, you could say, oh, we are like scientists analyze that. But this very moment, somewhere in millions light years from us, happening something on some planet. And even physics is constructed in the way that it's not only space like between us and that planet, but it's also time different. We are never even living in the same time. So it's totally not significant information for us. You would say, okay, we can scale blockchain in different way as IOTA does, for example. But super, but that's not blockchain. So why you're using this term, blockchain? In one of presentations recently, Vitalik Buterin were talking about different solutions, how they are planning to scale Ethereum. And one of the solutions was sharding. Another solution was called Plasma. There are different solutions like Raiden network, which is similar to Lightning, and also using faster even virtual machine using WebAssembly, and many solutions. And even Vitalik told that we can scale blockchain thousands of times, but it still will be at least in order of 1,000 slower than normal database. And he pointed that for some use cases, this price of being something 1,000 times more expensive in terms of networking, data and CPU is good enough to pay. I do agree with Vitalik that this 1,000 times more expensive solution in some use cases is good enough, because we really do care about decentralization with money, with identity, maybe with some other places. But in most of places, you don't need to have so slow and so expensive databases. These days, when I'm listening that everything what has blockchain getting a lot of investment from venture capitals or with the ICOs, and everyone would like to create their own private blockchains, I'm asking why you would like to create private blockchain. Just use what is important in blockchain. There are some math, some cryptography, some another things which are components of Bitcoin or Ethereum, and usually it would be enough even for different registers of data. What's important for registers, it's maybe immutability, it's for sure immutability, it's interoperability, it's auditability. But another aspect like censorship resistance and stuff like that, it's not always that important for most of use cases. So people, stop talking about blockchain, that it will be scaled forever, that in the future it will scale. I don't want to know that John went to toilet somewhere in Buhauba. It don't need to be persisted forever for all the ages. It's not important information. And this information never have to be stored on blockchain. Usually you don't need to have blockchain. Just use normal database.